So in your language arts classes, you guys have been learning all about World War II. Some of you have been reading about the experiences of people who didn't survive. Some of you have been reading about the experiences of people that helped. And today you have the opportunity to hear from a woman who survived. Magda Braun was born in 1927 in Miskolc, Hungary, and lived a relative safety until the Nazis began to implement the final solution. And when I learned that we might have the opportunity to host a speaker, somebody with first-hand knowledge at Norris Middle School, I was beyond excited to be able to provide you that opportunity. But when the arrangements became official and I was told who was visiting our school, I got even more emotional about it. Because excited was no longer the right word. Excited is incongruous with our speaker's experiences, and it almost is like joyful, and that wasn't right. And it took me a minute to put my finger on it. But I'm absolutely humbled and honored that we are able to host Ms. Braun here today. Students, I do need to remind you that you are going to be polite and attentive listeners today, that you must remain in your seats for the duration of the presentation. And I would thank you so much for your enthusiasm for Mrs. Braun's talk. And with that, Ms. Magda Braun, we are privileged to welcome you. Please share your story with us.
Good afternoon, and I'm happy to see such a full house. And my name is Magda Braun. I was born and raised in Hungary. I was a happy-go-lucky child. I did my homework. I didn't do my homework. I hung out with the kids. So I'm trying to tell you that I wasn't any different than you children at this age, but I was your age. Matter of fact, I have a picture of me when I was graduating 8th grade. And here again, I'm showing you that I had 2 eyes and 2 ears and whatever the body has. So the point here is that I wasn't any different. So what happens when tragedy strikes, and how does that happen? Many of you studied Second World War history, and you heard about a very bad man named Hitler, who became the president of Germany in 1933. And from that time on, all the tragedies were happening to the Jewish people, to the Jehovah's Witnesses, and many other people he did not like. So, how did it all develop? There were many discriminatory laws popping up, one after another, to the Jewish people. First, they would take away your property. Now, for instance, in America, when you have any kind of business or property, and you want to sell it, you have money exchange and so on to sell that business. In our situation, the law came, the Jew could no longer own a business. They took it away from you. That's it. So all these things ends up that people start becoming unemployed, and there are many of these discriminatory laws that was hurting the Jewish people. So Hungary is doing okay until March 19, 1944, when Hitler decides that Hungary is not doing enough what he called the final solution. That was his key mantra. So, the Nazi soldiers occupied Hungary. And with that, all the tragedies start hitting us Jewish people. For instance, when these Nazi soldiers are in Germany, the first order we get to have this Jewish Star of David sewed very tightly on our clothing. Without that, we were not permitted to go outdoors. The irony here is that even tiny little children had to wear this marker, shall we say. Now the child doesn't know why she has to have this Star of David sewed onto their clothing. But I mean, this was one form of discriminating from the other people, or from the other religions. But this is nothing. Within about 10 days from that point, an order comes from the government that all Jewish people will have to leave their home and they will be put into a ghetto. And a ghetto in America, we understand, it's an area where some ethnic group decides to reside. But thank God they have the total freedom to move somewhere else if they don't want to stay there. But in real life, a ghetto meant that all the Jewish people were put into this designated area. So how did they do that? Let's say that you lived in a suburb or in a farm area within the state. So the big city would have a section allocated to the ghetto. So the people in the outlying areas were given 1 hour to pack a little overnighter bag with a couple of days of provision. And here came the biggest lie of the 20th century. They told the people that they are going to be moved to another country because they need laborers. Now what does that mean? That means that the people were calm, they did not resist. After all, this is the height of the Second World War, so they need laborers in another country. It was a very smooth way of describing that why they are being moved to another country. So that meant that they didn't resist. So now comes to the moving the people into this ghetto, designated ghetto area. I happened to be born and lived in the house that will become the ghetto. In our home, we had my parents, my brother and I, and an aunt and uncle, meaning 6 people living in that house. Now the police comes with these people from the outlying areas, looks into my house and makes an executive decision and shoves in a bunch of people to my home. Well, children, my home became the residency for 40 people. You cannot fathom what crowded conditions can be. Now, these people may have traveled several miles on foot to get to this location. They are exhausted. They have to find a little corner in that limited space to rest their tired body. So in psychology, they point out different personalities. Well, here there were everything. There was the quiet person, the praying one, the cursing one. There were all people, all different behaviors. It was a very, very stressful time at that point. So now, once all the people were congregated in the ghetto, they were no longer out. You couldn't go to a doctor, you couldn't go to school, you couldn't make a living. So it was a very difficult situation to get accustomed to from your normalcy of life to this point. Once the ghetto is completely filled, then, like I said, they're no longer out. So our food within the ghetto was very limited, and of course, if you were ill, there was no way of going to get medicine to a pharmacy or everything. So there were many, many very difficult situations. Now here in Hungary, we had a different situation than people who lived in other parts of Europe. Because for instance, this tragedy began in Poland several years before. So now we are, March 1944, that's like towards the end of the war and all the tragedies. So what I'm trying to say is Hungary is one of the last group of people to be moved to their death. So now we are in the ghetto, and in less than 51 days, they are moving us from our ghetto to the other end of town, into a brickyard. And you wonder, why in heaven's name did they move us to a brickyard when there's absolutely nothing there but bricks? Open field, no water, no toiletry, nothing. But you see, the Holocaust was a very well coordinated tragedy. So, the reason they moved us to the brickyard was that it was adjacent to the railroad tracks. And on my 17th birthday, on June 11th, they crowded us into this kettle car, an ordinary kettle car, okay? Nothing in it except 2 buckets, one filled with water and the other bucket for toilet use. Now they start loading the people into these boxcars, and if you look inside a boxcar, you would imagine maybe 25, 30 people sitting on the wooden floor. They crowded in as many as 70, 75 human beings. There was no way of moving from one corner to the other. We were just pushed together. In order to allow my parents to sit on the wooden floor, I stood for 3 solid days, shifting one way, one time, this way, that way, but that was the only movement. On the second day, the train was crossing Hungary into Czechoslovakia, and there's a beautiful mountain range at the border, and at that particular time, I was shifted to an itty-bitty little window, not bigger than our laptop. So I'm looking out, and the train is passing the bush, lush green fields. It was the Carpathian Mountains. And I look outside, and in the distance, I see a shepherd minding his field. In my deranged mind, I was wondering, how come he is there and I am here? You see, at that point, I thought that the whole world was locked up in a boxcar. I couldn't see anybody walking freely. So this train ride was very, very treacherous. And by the way, that bucket of water that they gave us at the beginning of the journey was never, ever refilled again. For 3 solid days, we were traveling to an unknown destination without any water. You know, we can have physical pain, we can have stress. Nothing is worse than thirst. It is the most painful thing. Your mind cannot concentrate on anything else. The only thing is, if I could only have a sip of water. That is pure torture. So now, the 3rd day, we arrived to an unknown destination. They opened the boxcars, and we step out, and there are some Nazi soldiers directing the traffic, and they start separating the people. The men in one column, and the women this column. Except that the men, meaning my father and relatives, so forth, that was the last time I saw any of my male relatives. So now there are a group of women and children, and we have to line up like soldiers, 5 abreast, and they start counting us. So once they did that procedure, then they put us into an empty room, like a gym or something like that, and we have to disrobe totally. Order, fold up your clothes, lay it down, you will get it later because you're gonna get a shower, okay? We are heading for the showers, and some women are coming out from the adjacent room, and they are screaming from the top of their lungs because in that back room, they shaved our head bald, all our body hair was shaven, and if that's not bad enough, they sprayed disinfectant on the freshly shaven skin. We looked totally unrecognizable for the first couple of hours until we started looking in your friends' eyes and listening to their voices. We could get to know who we were. So now comes the shower. Far, far away from the shower you took in your lovely home. This is nothing more than a room with about 50 shower heads screwed into the ceiling. And a trickle of cold water was reaching your dirty, smelly body. There was no soap, no towel, no clean underwear. So now we go into another room and they throw an ill-fitting uniform on. They took our shoes away as well, and they gave us, the best way I can describe it, flip-flops that had like a leather band on top of the, on the top of the foot, and it had wooden soles. It was the most difficult thing to learn to walk in it. So now comes sleeping time. Sleeping time was in one room, 500 of us. Well, let's see about the size of this room. And then there's absolutely nothing in it but a wooden floor. So our row would be like 100, so 500. And we had to lay down on the wooden floor. The flip-flop was our pillow, and the body heat next to you was your blanket. They had 2 buckets in the corner there for toilet to use, and this was a way you had to sleep, you know, no other luxuries here. The crack of the dawn, the order was, you see what they have done? They have allocated an older prisoner. Older meaning not necessarily age-wise, but they have been imprisoned longer than we were. So her job was to line us up 5 abreast. Now let's say I am in a unit of 500 people, and we line up 5 abreast, and now she has to start counting that we are the 500. And this counting insanity could take place for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. I don't know why, to this day, after 73 years, I still cannot figure out the logic behind counting us. We looked unrecognizable. And the camp itself was circled with electrified barbed wires. Now, where in heaven's name we could have escaped to, I will never, ever know. But nevertheless, they kept counting. So what happened, after a while, some of our colleagues were getting sick because they wouldn't give us any medicine. Let's say somebody was a diabetic, you know, that requires daily medication. And they wouldn't give us any. So what happened? But they still had to be counted. So we improvised a system where there would be the 5 of us, okay? So 2 and 2, and we put the sick in the middle. To be counted. Then she could drop dead, but they had to be counted. There was another crazy discrimination where we would no longer be permitted to go back into the sleeping quarters until the evening. So we had to wander outside in a certain designated area, and by this time it's June, July, and the sun is as warm and beating down on us. Matter of fact, many of our blonde girls were getting terrible sunburns. And here we were just wandering from one corner to another. And this is where life, the best way to explain that to you, you existed in thinking of faith and fantasy. You had to have some faith to believe that tomorrow will be another day. And fantasy started where we would stand in groups and talking to each other how it was back home. Some of the older people would tell us youngsters different recipes. I mean, this was all fantasy to get our minds away from reality. Food is, there are no words for it. It was so bad. It was in the morning, they gave us some green liquid, some unidentifiable stuff was floating in it. Matter of fact, the first day they were trying to, serve this food for us, we were gagging and we wouldn't want to drink it. But we realized that if we don't have that, we have nothing else. So when you're really hungry, you eat anything. By the way, there was no such luxury as normal utensils. They gave us only one bowl, that was everything. Water, if you were lucky, we got maybe a cup full of water once a day. So, I mean, that was torture from the highest level imaginable that you don't even want to know about. So we are going through this situation, and after we are there for about a couple of days, we asked the old-timer prisoners, I said, could you please tell us how soon we're going to see our relatives who were ordered to go to that direction? Inevitably, they will raise their arms and point to the 5 chimneys. I said, that is where your parents are. Oh, come on. This is the 20th century. They do not kill people, just like that. But unfortunately, that's what happened. The people who were directed in that direction, they were going into the crematorium where they burned them to death. So, it was something that is very hard for a 17-year-old to understand. From that point on, I become an orphan. I haven't got a parent to guide me through these very difficult times. And you grow up very fast because you have no choice. You have to make your own decisions. So we were at this location for about 2 months, and then they would ship us out, 1,000 of us from the group, ship us out to an ammunition factory in Germany. The factory, first of all, we were young kids just out of school. We had never seen a factory, let alone work in a factory. But you'll be surprised how fast you learn when you are forced to do it. So the factory manufactured rockets and bombs. So my job was to fill a highly poisonous liquid material that came through the room, through pipes, into a bomb that was in front of your workbench. And then you inserted that poison liquid into the bomb, lock it, and 2 people had to lift it to take it to another location. We are working at this location for about 6-7 months, and by this time, our hair starts growing out into crew-cut size. And we look at each other, and if your hair was black, now it's orange, your lips are deep dark purple, and your face is lemon yellow. What has taken place? We were working with this highly poisonous material without any protective garment, so it started invading our body. But thank God, the end was nearing, otherwise I wouldn't have the pleasure of talking to you. So the end of March 1945, the Allies were getting closer, and then they wanted to move us away from the liberators. So they put us on what they call a death march. So we had a very thin spring coat, and our leg was bare, and it was a very, very cold march. So we are marching on this open highway without any protective warmth. It was just very, very cold. And for the night, we were sleeping in the ditches in the wet ground. So on the 3rd day, we are crossing a village and a wheat field of some sort, farm area. Now comes fantasy big time. A group of us are standing in front of this field, and in the distance we see a barn. and we start telling each other, how would it be if during the night we take a chance and crawl on our belly to reach that barn and hide there? You see, our self-esteem was zero at this point. So what? They find us, they kill us, it will all be over. But thank God, we made it to the barn during the night. And of course, like they say, we were shaking in our boots because of the obvious reason. And the next day, we look at the little peephole, and there are two young men approaching. They wear a uniform that we have never seen before. Well, these were two beautiful soldiers from the U.S. 6th Armored Division who risked their lives to save ours, and they were our liberators. So then their captain took charge over us and went into German villages asking the mayor to find housing for us and some food and some kind of a clothing. So it was a very difficult time, but anyhow, this was the way we were liberated. And now I am all alone. I'm not even 18 years old. I realized that in less than a year I became an orphan. I lost my property, my home, my country. I don't have a penny to my name. I don't have a profession, and I'm not even 18 years old. So here we have to be very strong and look forward that tomorrow will be better. That's the only attitude you can do for in your own life if you have any kind of difficult periods. You got to think that tomorrow will be better, because giving up is not the answer. So now we are liberated, and during that summer we are still recuperating. A chaplain is interviewing us and asking a variety of questions. And among them he said, do you have any relatives around the world? And I said, well, yes. My father had two brothers and a sister who emigrated to the United States, to Chicago, in 1908. The only thing I knew was their name and Chicago. So this chaplain gave this information from Germany to New York to the Hebrew Immigrant Society, where wonderful volunteers kept searching in Chicago till they found my relatives. Now here I have to throw in a little important thing rather. Telephones were extremely expensive. There was no high-tech stuff like texting and email and all the good stuff. So it took a lot of effort from many people's part to make all these connections. So with all these connections, I was able to connect with my relatives. And meantime, all this is in process. I meet a young man who was my brother's childhood friend. And I asked him, I said, have you seen my brother Michael? He said, yes, I saw him last year, Christmas time, in Budapest, which is Hungary's capital city. So now comes joy and a situation. He is alive, so how can I get in touch with him? So through very difficult circumstances, I traveled back to Hungary. Trains were not running on time, and I had very little money. But nevertheless, I make it back to Hungary. I go into my hometown, and they kept a running record, a list of people who were lost or who were returning, so there was some kind of communication. So I go into this office, and I asked the person, I said, could you tell me about Michael? He said, well, I got good news for you, I got bad news for you. The good news is that he is alive. The bad news is that he is in Russian prison. Okay, now, again another decision to make. In the interim, communication is with my American relatives who are preparing 2 entry visas to the US. So I don't know what to do. Do I wait in Hungary for him? Do I just get going? So I waited a couple of months, and then I decided, who knows when liberation for him will be. So I left his papers with some friends in Hungary, and I went back to Germany, and then I communicated with the American authorities, and I got into America by September of 1946. But my brother did not return from Russian prison until 1948. I'm long in America already. And the other tragedy was that he worked in a prison in Russia where there was a paper processing factory or whatever it's called. And in order to make paper, they had to go to the swamp to cut down trees to make paper. And during the summer in Siberia, his job was to go to cut down trees in the swamps. He was bit by a mosquito and developed malaria. This is a terribly debilitating illness. So now he comes back from prison in 1948. I have another issue here. The United States has a Cold War between Russia and the US, and Hungary is under Russian ruling. So with that problem, plus the malaria, I could not reunite with him until 1962. So it was a very trying thing. I tried to help him from here with gift packages and whatever I could send, but it was a difficult time. So anyhow, in closing, I just want to leave you with the most important thing. Think about it, what I'm going to say. Next to your health, the most important treasure you have is freedom. So you are young people, you're learning, try to do everything in your power to protect freedom, because to be discriminated is a terrible thing, especially for a young person. And the other thing I want you to understand is, think before you hate. I'm not telling you to hate or not to hate, that's up to your conscience. But at least think about it. Why do I hate that person? Okay? Because genocide stems from hatred. And that is a terrible, terrible human behavior. And thirdly, once in a while, there is some person who denies the existence of the Holocaust. You know, this is the most mind-boggling thing for a survivor to listen to. In today's high-tech society, when you put your finger on that computer and all the original documents are popping up to say that it didn't exist, I mean, it is just a sad way of discriminating again. So anyhow, if any of you have any questions, you have to come up here. I'll be happy to answer. Otherwise, I thank you for listening. Thank you. I don't bite. I'm a good grandma.
How did you feel to find out that American soldiers were outside of the war?
How come, wait.
How did you feel?
Louder and slower.
How did you feel to find out that American soldiers were outside of the war?
How did I feel when the American soldiers liberated us? Well, these American soldiers were like 19 years old, almost the same age as we were. They were young soldiers. They were crying, we were crying, we were hugging. I mean, it is a moment that one cannot put into words. I mean, it is you know, I hope you never have to experience it, but here you are down in hell. That's the only way I can put it. And all of a sudden, somebody is putting out an arm to help you. It is a beautiful feeling, okay? Thanks for asking.
When they took you, what were some things that they made you do? And how did you feel?
Well, how did I feel about the bad things they made me do? What were the things? Well, for instance, the bad things were standing in the miserable, rainy weather without hardly any covering, any clothing, and just being out in the courtyard. That was a bad thing. The food was a bad thing. Hunger was a bad thing. Hunger, thirst, tiredness. Now, it's a young body. I mean, a 17, 18-year-old girl is strong. Although I want you to know that in the 1 year time of this Holocaust tragedy, I lost 60 pounds. That's not a way of reducing diet, but it was bad. Okay? Thank you. What did you do in the free time as a kid? Fantasize. Fantasy to the most unimaginable things. Matter of fact, there was one cute happening. One of our teachers happened to be imprisoned as well. So naturally, she would kind of help us and mentor us and talk to us different things. So one time, she gathered us around and asked, "Okay, children, what would you like to talk about today?" Well, don't tell me where it came to me, but this is what I said as a teacher. Could we talk about the French Revolution? No. Why I thought about it, I don't know. I assumed that I may have studied that subject in her class way back, but nevertheless, so then there would be older women who were in prison with us, older meaning maybe 25, 30 years tops, because the older people they killed right away. So now, these older people would tell us recipes, different kinds of recipes. You can't imagine when your stomach is so hungry, and then all of a sudden you go into a fantasy world and talk about stuffed pepper or Hungarian goulash and all the good Hungarian food. It gets your mind off from hurt. Okay? Thank you. How did I know?
How did you make us feel knowing that any woman could live their lives?
How could I make it, but that will be the last time? Faith and fantasy. I've been repeating this over and over again. I was raised in a religious home, so I had some faith. And what happened, some of the older prisoners remembered all the prayers for different holidays. Now there was no calendar, there was no newspaper, nothing. But they remembered. So we would gather. Now that's another thing. We were not allowed to be gathering in big groups. For what reason, I cannot tell. I don't know. But behind the toilets, we could hide. There they didn't bother watching us. Okay? So some of these older women would recite a prayer for whatever holiday it was, or for the Sabbath, and they knew it by heart. So that was a tremendous way of keeping our faith where it should be. So that helped me. Right. Thank you for this. If I were to be the Nazi soldier today, what would be my feelings? Okay. Now, if I met the Nazi soldier in the late 1940s, early 1950s, when the pain was very, very acute. I don't know how I would have responded. But today, remember what I said, think before you hate? Well, if I preach that, I better stick to what I probably say, right? I don't hate anyone. Matter of fact, I'm going to tell you children a German connection story of today. The Germany today is not what it was in the Nazi era. So, about 50 years ago, there was a Church of Ascension in Germany, and the board of directors started thinking, how could we help people in war-torn countries, disabled people, okay? So they came up with the idea that they will take high school graduates and train them how to go out in the world and do DC. It was not a Jewish issue, okay? Well, about 35 years ago, our Holocaust Museum in Chicago heard about their existence. Now the directors had to make a big decision. Do we dare invite these German children to our museum and meet the survivors? How will the two react to each other? So the director of the museum said, the only way we will know if we try, so let's do it. So they invited the volunteer children to serve 1 year at the museum, talking to the survivors and teaching, the museum has school groups coming once a day to hear a speaker and see the museum and so forth. So they have done that. And I have a German boyfriend. He's altogether 32 years old. And about 12 years ago, he was one of the volunteers' child. And I lived very close to the museum, so I would tell him, I said, Gregor, during your free time, come across the street to my house. I will give you refrigerator privilege. Now, what does it translate to a teenager? Cookies and Coca-Cola. So thus our friendship began. And then came his 19th birthday while he was still in America, and his parents. So I entertained the parents, and him, and now, do you know that he knows that I'm in Omaha? So does it answer something? That we are emailing constantly, and now he's a father, and matter of fact, his greatest picture is right next to my great grandson. So, it's a wonderful feeling. He did good deeds, and his group did good deeds, and I don't hate anyone anymore. Okay. You get all the answers? Do I have a diet like Anne Frank? No, I do not. I am on the internet. So many of your children send me emails. So what happens? They say, well, could you come to my school? 10 days ago, I ended up in upstate New York. One of these 7th graders kept writing me letters last summer. Could you come to my school? I said, well, are you in the Chicago area? She said, no, I live in upstate New York. Anyhow, she did a bake sale and all kinds of fundraisers to get me to her school. It's a tiny little Catholic school. The whole school has 80 students, so you can imagine. Anyhow, this child had all kinds of ways of collecting the money and so forth. And I had an opportunity to speak at her school and at her community. It turns out that she's a very shy child, so that teachers understand that it had taken a lot of courage for this little girl to make a move. And also what happens, I get internet requests that they are studying the Holocaust, and I have a question. So I have the answer. Write me your questions. I know how to answer on the email right next to your questions. And that's how I communicate. I have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these email communications. So, okay, thank you. Did I know if anybody could save me? At the time, we had no idea. We had no idea who will save us, how we will be saved, if we may get here the next day. But God is good. And send these soldiers, and that's how we were saved. Okay. Have I ever was ready to give up? Well, there was one very stressful moment where I was so hungry that I was crying. And I'm not a crying personality. So my friends who were next to me in the bunker, at one point from the battery in their bunker, so they looked at me and said, "What's the matter with you? Why are you crying?" I said, "I am so hungry I can't see straight." These girls had little crusts of bread, and they put their saving of a little bit of bread, and they fed me. That's humankind as beyond. Okay.